Today's episode is brought to you by Please Notes. What you focus on is what you get, so why not focus on success? Please Notes affirmation journals and sticky notes are designed to help you rewire your thoughts, boost confidence, and take action on your dreams. Every page is a reminder that your mindset shapes your reality. The question is, what will you choose to create? Start manifesting your future today at www.pleasenotes.com. In today's episode of the Wild Party Podcast, we're digging into the world of sustainable gardening with Chad Massura, the founder of Rosy Soil. His company is changing the way we think about soil, creating blends that not only help plants thrive, but also help the environment. Chad shares how he took his idea from concept to reality, the challenges of scaling a sustainable business, and why soil quality is more important than most people realize. We also get into the realities of eco-friendly packaging, how Rosy Soil supports home gardeners, and why education is such a big part of his mission. Plus, he reveals how he helped uncover the key ingredient that improves plant health while reducing environmental impact. If you love plants, sustainability, or just a great entrepreneurial story, you're going to love this conversation. Let's get the party started. Welcome to the Wild Party Podcast, where we celebrate the visionaries behind vegan, ethical, and sustainable business. In each episode, we'll dive deep into their journeys, uncovering the why behind their mission-driven business. I'm your host, Stephanie Lahart. Tune in with me for passionate discussions about overcoming challenges, innovative marketing strategies, and the power of using business as a force for good. So whether you're an entrepreneur seeking guidance or a conscious consumer wanting to support impactful brands, join us as we explore the stories behind the businesses that are changing the world for the better. Let's get the party started. And today I'm so excited to welcome to the podcast is Chad Massura, the creator, founder, and I guess idea man behind Rosy Soil, which is one of those things that I didn't know I needed in my life, and now I'm obsessed with it because I am a home gardener, and I thought I was doing everything right, and then I realized I was doing everything wrong. So Chad's here today with us to not only share his entrepreneur journey, but also tell us how we can be better gardeners for not only our own home gardens, but for the Garden of Earth as well. So Chad, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here, and I'm sure that you're doing most of everything good in the garden. So we can dive into it, but I'm sure you're doing an awesome job.
Well, I do live in California, which I told you earlier. So I did make a very important step many years ago where I did transition to a totally drought resistant garden. I was one of those people in the beginning. I'm like, I have flowers
Awesome.
and everything. I'm like, well, I live in a very dry climate. I should probably have drought resistant plants. So I have a lot of succulents and things like that, and they're thriving, and I love it. And I've learned a ton of that. But I have to admit, I was not as well educated in the soil. So I'm still catching up to that. And lo and behold, here you come along with Rosy Soil, which is not only going to improve my garden, but the earth as well. So why don't you tell our listeners really quickly, what is Rosy Soil about?
Yeah, great. So Rosy Soil is an organic, eco-friendly soil company. We use a really interesting input called biochar as the base of our mix, and that creates a bunch of performance benefits. So to your point, it holds water better, it holds nutrients better, it actually acts as a storehouse for microbes. So we call it like a living soil in a bag. And then by going from kind of the traditional potting soil to biochar, we actually create a much more sustainable product. So instead of releasing CO2, which is what a lot of potting soils do, biochar actually captures CO2. So our entire brand, our entire supply chain is also net carbon negative. But we're really focused on basically trying to marry performance and sustainability to give gardeners a better option.
Yeah, and what's this whole peat-free thing about? Because I see it all over your literature, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know this was a problem. What is happening with peat?
Yeah, so and I was the exact same way as you. I grew up gardening. I've been buying peat-based soils my whole life because basically every potting soil, in the soil aisle is made from harvested peat bogs, and it was something I didn't know about. And when I kind of went down the rabbit hole, I was similar to you. I was like pretty disappointed that this hobby that I just assumed was super good for the environment had this, kind of dirty secret to it. But so basically, peat moss is what most potting soils is made from. It's harvested from peat bogs, which are really important ecosystems. They house a number of important plant and bird and animal species, and they also act as storehouses for carbon. So peat bogs only represent about 3% of the Earth's landmass, but hold about 20% of the Earth's stored carbon. They actually hold more carbon than the Earth's forests. And in processing these peat bogs, basically in draining them and pulling peat off the surface, we release a lot of CO2. And so peat harvesting and peatland destruction actually accounts for about 5% of total global emissions. It's worse than the airline industry by 2x. And so, unfortunately, most potting soils actually come with a pretty high carbon and environmental footprint, which just seems, again, so backwards from, how I was thinking as a gardener and how I think most gardeners think about their hobby.
Absolutely. I will tell you, so when I did get into gardening years ago and I would go to my local garden store, I would walk in and I would say something that's going to make you cringe because I got corrected so many times. I would be like, "Oh yeah, I need some dirt." And they're like, "It's not dirt, it's soil." And I'm like, "Whatever." Like I'm from Philadelphia. I was very dismissive. And then I gradually learned as my gardening journey went on. I'm like, "Oh, I understand. It is not dirt. It is soil, and it is a specific, a specific blend for a specific plant. So yeah, it's been a journey for me. So speaking of journeys, then let's talk about, how you first got interested in the world of gardening and soil, because I have read that you were always into gardens as a kid and things like that. But what gave you the idea that, to launch this business? When did you first, I guess, realize that there was a need for something like Rosy Soil?
Yeah, so like I said, it helps that I grew up gardening. So I lived with my grandma in Chicago. She was a big gardener. I was out in the garden from a young age and kind of a little soil nerd. Like, I actually asked for potting soil for Christmas when I was 3 years old and got a giant pile of potting soil under the Christmas tree. So perhaps I was destined to start this company. Although, to be honest with you, gardening for me was always something I kind of did outside of my stressful career. Like, it was very much I don't know, a mental health kind of joy, kind of exercise, kind of food hobby, and not something I was necessarily thinking about from a business perspective. And I was working in the food industry. I actually built a food delivery business before this. And as I was starting to just kind of uncover and unravel what was happening in the food industry, I sort of realized I may be on the wrong side of it. And that kind of discovery sent me down a whole super long journey towards first getting really interested in climate change and sustainability and all the problem sets there. And then specifically in this concept of carbon capture, which is, basically to get to net zero, we have to pull CO2 out of the air. And that kind of line of reasoning and research and just kind of me nerding out with some, like climate textbooks, brought me to discover this input called biochar. So biochar is the key to kind of our product, but it's also really an important climate technology. It is one of the leading ways to pull CO2 out of the air. And as I started reading about biochar, I read about its opportunity as a peat replacement. And that was kind of the light bulb moment where I went, oh, I know about peat. What's the problem with peat? And that kind of sent me down that sort of rabbit hole. And I just made the connection between, hey, we can actually deliver a better, higher quality product for gardeners, one that I was kind of craving personally, but kind of behind the scenes also empower this really important sort of climate focused industry to scale and get more awareness and get more customers and all of that good stuff. So I just got totally obsessed with that idea and, started basically blending soil in my kitchen and convincing my friends to try out this weird concoction I was making. And, one thing led to another and Rosy Soil was born.
I'm laughing because, during the pandemic, we had a whole legion of home bakers that showed up because
Yes,
people are like, I have all this time at home, I'm going to bake. But also, people got really into gardening. I don't
they
think
did.
it got as much play on Instagram because I don't know, I think bread was more exciting at that point. But, with the gardening, like people did start realizing, hey, I want to garden and kind of figuring that out. And I can see you were on, that journey already, which is awesome. I just want to backtrack a second because you mentioned your first business, which was called Envoy. And I will let you know, I actually knew about Envoy way before I ever knew about you or Rosy
No
So or
way.
anything. because weirdly enough, I used to work for a company called Envoy Technologies
Okay.
that
Yeah.
was an electric car share service. And when I first started working for them, I was in marketing. And I'm doing my market research and we're doing our marketing plans, and all of a sudden Envoy delivery service shows up. And I was like, oh, and first of all, I believe you guys were in action way before the other Envoy. You had a very big footprint already as far as marketing. Like you were very well known. And I remember like turning to my bosses at the time thinking, you picked a really bad name. Did you not know there was this other Envoy? Like, and they
That's
were like,
so
oh no,
funny.
it's fine. It's a different company. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Because every time I would do a search, Envoy, your company would show up.
That's so funny.
And
Wow,
yeah,
what a
and I
small
was like,
world.
you guys, I would tell my then bosses, I was like, I really think you should have rethought this, but whatever. So it's funny to me then when I became aware of Rosy Soil and was introduced to you, and they're like, oh yeah, he started Envoy. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like literally stalking
Full
this
circle.
guy.
That's so funny. What a
Yeah.
small world. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
really funny. So the other envoy's still there. They are thriving. Good for them. And I
Great.
guess the other envoy delivery service is still there. So tell me the transition then. You were already involved in this other company. What made you then decide I'm going to launch this new business that's going to be based on, I don't know, taking care of the earth?
Yeah, and it wasn't as I think in retrospect it's a lot clearer than it ever is kind of in the moment. But like I said, we it was a food delivery service. We were focused on college campuses. I started it when I was in college and totally fell in love with the process of building a business. But I think I came to realize that, we were delivering mostly kind of fast food on demand to be super convenient. And I just started to get this kind of gut feeling that I was sort of on the wrong side of the food industry. And I didn't know at the time what that meant or where that would take me, but it ended up being, yeah, really a 5 year journey, including dropping out for a bit and farming on organic farms in South America to actually working for a really cool food access, food impact startup in Los Angeles to a lot of tinkering, in that kind of COVID time with some different concepts and ideas to, really, I think, getting pretty excited about this soil concept. And I tried to convince myself it was a bad idea. Because I have a tendency to get a little too excited about things. So I tried to just frame it from, all the kind of problem sets with soil and all of that good stuff. And as I tried to convince it kind of backfired. I just got more and more excited about the concept.
Well, you were clearly already on your journey of eco-friendly and sustainability. I could see
Yeah.
the little seeds of it already blooming in you. Yes, I'm using all the puns today. So it doesn't surprise me. So, when you decided, hey, I want to get into this realm and develop this soil, what were kind of the first steps that you took to, obviously you need to create a product. So there was a lot of research then. As you're creating these home blends in your kitchen, what was the next step you had to take to, okay, I have an idea. How do I get this sourced, create it, and out into the market?
Yeah, it was, it started kind of slow and simple and sort of expanded from there. So, it started with just a lot of research around biochar, why it's important, what the sort of benefits are, how to get people excited about biochar. It was a lot of just cold emailing and LinkedIning people in the biochar industry. And many people in that industry are awesome and warm and want to share their knowledge. So that was, I got to talk to like some of the largest manufacturers fairly quickly as kind of a nobody, which was cool. And then like I said, I just started blending it basically in my kitchen, using it both in my garden and convincing my friends to use it in their garden and my parents to use it, that kind of stuff. And it just started to get some attention amongst gardeners. I think there is this sort of gap between I think what people think about their garden, which is, super organic, super high quality, super good for the earth, nourishing their body, and what's ultimately, I think, being provided on shelf for gardeners. And so, we just kind of stumbled into this white space and it started to quickly take off. I mean, I basically set up like a little Shopify site and started selling little bags of biochar. And before I knew it, we had done like 60 grand in biochar sales while I was working a full-time job. And I finally said, you know what, there is something here. I need to go explore this thing. I'm going to go crazy if I don't do it. So I went full time and kind of was off to the races from there. And I would say the the best first step I took was my first hire was a full-time soil researcher, someone 1,000 times more intelligent than me at all of these concepts to, I think, really take a scientific and iterative approach to our formulation. So we actually worked on the formulation for about a year before
Hmm.
we really released Rosie to the world because we wanted to really deliver on those performance expectations for customers. I think it's one thing to say we're super sustainable, but I think if you can say, yes, we're super sustainable, but we're also just the best soil you can buy, I think that goes a long way in ultimately kind of achieving our bigger mission. So that was the kind of general impetus for Rosie.
Okay, so I have like a personal interest question for you right now. So I am a vegan. I am also a gardener, and somebody pointed
Yeah.
out to me, and I did not do my own research, so I don't know if this is true. They said, "Hey, if you buy organic food or you use organic soil, that's all made with manure, and that's not vegan." Is that true?
I think you could debate this. So, for example, we use an input called worm castings, which are it's basically worms process food waste and create a really high quality organic fertilizer. And I think there's an ongoing debate over, whether it's essentially manure from worms is considered vegan or not vegan. We do use a vegan compost, so it's a totally plant-based wood waste, green waste compost. Um, but there's a lot of high quality inputs that do come from animals. We've generally kind of decided where to use them and where not to use them. But you could take this debate even further where, a living soil is produced by microbes, basically eating and consuming organic matter. And so, how far do we want to go? You would be hard pressed to find something that was grown in something that microbes hadn't touched?
Yeah, no,
So
that's a great point. And I think when these people were pointing it out to me, they were more leaning towards that they were inferring that there was somehow like cow products involved, like cow manure or cow bones. For some reason, people seem to think that soil on the market is made from like bovine hooves and like bones and stuff. And like I said, I haven't done my own research, so I didn't know, but I figure I'll come to the expert right now. You tell me, like
yeah,
honestly,
so
are there cows in my soil when I'm buying it at the store? Just tell me that
So
I will live with the worm. I will live with the worm component right
yeah,
now, but are there
yeah.
cows? Let me know.
So I guess my recommendation is to check the ingredient deck on your soil product. And unfortunately, many soil brands tuck it in fine print way at the bottom, because they're kind of trying to hide the fact that there's peat moss in there, the fact that there's often sewage sludge, the fact that there's kind of cheap fillers. But yes, I mean, some common inputs that the industry uses includes like bone meal, which is ground basically bones, fish meal, which is ground fish, um, and then certainly animal-based manures as well. So again, my recommendation is kind of, check the back of the packaging. We're very clear, like we list in big font right on the back because we like to nerd out about inputs, what goes into each bag and what doesn't. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and thank you, because now I feel much more educated now when I'm having these
Hmm.
conversations with people. They
Yeah,
like to throw things at you sometimes. I'm like, I don't know. Let me go put that on my list of stuff to look up.
yeah.
But speaking of like what's really gone into your technology and your research, tell me like how is your team actually measuring and optimizing the entire life cycle of the Rosie products to be carbon neutral? What does that look like?
It's such an interesting question, and it's a really fun part of the process. So that lead researcher I was telling you about, his name is Jules. His basic job is to try to maximize plant performance while minimizing CO2 footprint. And that is such a fun kind of battle that we have essentially every week. And so what we do is we run basically different, essentially recipes, but small iterations of our recipe in plant trials. So, we'll put 20 plants in this version and 20 plants in this version and see which does better on a number of metrics. And then we take that information and basically pit it against the life cycle assessment that we've conducted on those inputs. And that helps us decide both what inputs should we use and how much should we use to, again, maximize performance, minimize footprint. So to give you an example, biochar is a wonderful kind of win-win in both of these directions, where biochar is wonderful from a performance perspective. It makes a really rich living soil, and it's net carbon negative. So as much as we can kind of put into the soil, we try to do, because it wins on both of those dimensions. But an example of one that would take us in the opposite direction obviously would be peat. So, peat has some benefits to soil, although personally I don't think they're that great, but obviously a super high CO2 footprint. And so we won't touch it with a 10-foot pole because of that. And you can go down our ingredient deck and compare it to the ingredient deck of a lot of our competitors, and you start to see some obvious differences with choices that we've made compared to, I would say, what the kind of rest of the industry does.
Yeah, I could see that. There's so much thought that has to go into this for a product
Yeah,
that not many people think about, myself included. It's just like, just give me a bag of soil. I don't really know what that means.
right.
And to hear what you're saying now about, that it should be carbon neutral and there's this CO2, it's not something that immediately comes to mind because you're like, what does that mean? But I think as a society, we're now becoming more aware of the fact that like landfills, one of the biggest problems is food waste
Yeah.
because it builds up so much of this carbon, chaos that goes on. We didn't know. So I think back in the day, like you were saying about peat, it was so used because we didn't know the
We didn't
detrimental
know.
effect
Yeah.
that was going to have. And now we know. We're like, okay, we got to back off the peat. That's not a good idea. So, in fact, I think that should be the name of your podcast. What's with Pete? That'll be the name of your podcast. I decided. What's with Pete? People are like,
I love
why
it.
is Chad talking about Pete? What's his beef with Pete?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it makes for a really interesting kind of conversation that Jules and I have almost every week, Like there's a really common input called perlite, which is used as an aeration amendment. It's basically those little white dots that you've seen in basically every bag of potting soil. That is a superheated, they basically pop rocks with
Mm.
temperature. And so it's a decent soil amendment, but it comes with a really high CO2 footprint. We kind of nixed it early on, and instead we went with input called pine fines, which are little pieces of wood that kind of look similar and do something similar in the mix. That is a basically waste stream from the mulch industry. They can't use those little bits. We'll take them all day because again, it still gives us that performance. It gives us the aeration and drainage that you need for a quality soil with a much lower CO2 footprint. And I could go on about this for days. Like we argue about this constantly. So the ingredient side is a really interesting piece to this whole thing. And at the end of the day, like the quality of your soil depends on the quality of your inputs. And we've, had the luxury to choose at every turn the highest quality possible inputs, the most organic inputs, and the lowest kind of CO2 inputs. And that ends up creating this really rich soil.
Yeah, nice. It's like I said, it's so thoughtful there, and there's so much science into it. A layperson's never going to be able to really understand it. So I'm really appreciative that something like the Rosy Soil website takes the time to have blog posts and really explain like what all this means. Because to a consumer, you're just like this or that. What do I need, right?
Yeah.
Do I need something
Yeah.
for a succulent? Do I need something for a flower? Is there a difference? And we're learning the answer is yes and yes. Okay, so you said with this business, you started by launching it on Shopify and you had a certain amount of success, and that was awesome. But now you're in major retailers like Target and I think Thrive Market. So tell me, what did that journey look like to actually get your product into the retailers?
Yeah. So, well, with Target specifically, we got super lucky. So we launched the brand on Earth Day 2022, and about 3 months later, the Target buyer filled out our website form saying she was interested in our product, which is it was great. I like fell out of my chair basically. Thank goodness that email didn't go to spam. But yeah, she was basically Googling sustainable potting soil, and unfortunately, there's not a lot out there. And so, Target has these really cool sustainability goals. So we could kind of, but they're also looking for kind of quality. And so, I think what we were working on really aligned with their bigger strategy. And we got super lucky that they kind of took a chance on this tiny brand at the time. Um, but I think just as importantly, we recognized that the kind of independent garden centers and plant shops are often the kind of curators of the good products. I think me personally as a gardener, whenever I had a gardening question, I would go to my local garden center and kind of ask a bunch of questions and try to learn things. And so we've really taken a kind of independent retail first approach to the whole business. So we're in almost 1,000 garden centers all over the country, basically in every major city. And we work really closely to try to educate their staff on how to talk about biochar and peat and all of that good stuff. And also just, I think, try to show up where gardeners are and try to just provide a better, kind of easier option. I think a big part of this is just trying to make better gardening and more sustainable gardening as easy as humanly possible so that as many people get on board with this mission as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And how exciting that must have been to get that random email from somebody at Target. You're like, wait, what? The actual Target?
Yeah,
And I
right.
think every business owner has that one moment where they get some kind of communication like that. And I was just talking to somebody where we were feeling like we needed to start framing specific emails in our businesses that kind of were game changers. Because, back in the day when you made your first dollar, you would
Right.
frame that. Now we
Yeah.
frame our emails, the ones that
I
like
love it.
changed our business. So
That's a
I'm
great
not saying
idea. I'm gonna
Target
go.
changed your business, but what a nice thing for them to outreach and have a sustainability goal of their own.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great idea. I think I will frame that email. It's a great idea.
start, start framing it, right? Yeah. So, with that said, so you were at a company that was gathering a lot of success, Envoy originally, and then you decided, you wanted to pivot and do this other thing. From an entrepreneur or a personal level, what did that look like for you? Because you did start developing blends on your own, but to move to that next step of actually creating the product and hiring people, how did that funding look like for you? Did you get loans? Did you have personal funding? What happened there?
Yeah. And I mean, that was definitely a very scary moment. It went from something that I was doing as I guess, a side hustle. I was doing it nights and weekends and working a really intense job at that food startup I was telling you about. Um, and, uh, and I just couldn't get this idea out of my head. I just felt like I just had to work on it. And so, yeah, I specifically remember I had a conversation with the kind of founder of the food startup, and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about this weird soil thing. What do you think?" And he was incredibly supportive and said, "You have to go do it, and I'm going to invest." So he was, basically the first check in, and then we were able to raise a couple more kind of small angel checks just to get off the ground and pay our researcher salary and launch a tiny little soil lab. And we were kind of off to the races from there.
Awesome. So now moving forward, since you do have the momentum and you're having some success and people are really interested and you're in Target, what has been maybe some of the sustainability challenges that you guys have encountered along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say every week we're arguing about some different ingredient. So it's constant and forever. We redo our life cycle assessment every year to just try to sharpen our pencils and go deeper on every aspect of our supply chain. So I don't know. I would say that is a forever journey. It will never stop. I love thinking about it, and I love the kind of conflict that it creates. But one thing that comes to mind as you were saying that is packaging specifically. I think packaging is a really challenging aspect of our industry, and I would say, most industries. When we started, we found this really cool packaging supplier that made a plant-based bag. So it was made from sugarcane, regeneratively grown sugarcane, and then basically formed into a plastic-like material that we then, bagged up and put our soil in. Actually, I will say before that we tried paper and it would just explode. Like we would ship it to people and there's moisture and it's microbial active. I would love to use paper. It's just this industry can't do it. So then we moved to this really cool sugarcane based plastic and it was kind of working, but what would happen is about 5% of the time the seams would bust. It's a heavy product, there's moisture, and so what we ended up doing is we were basically shipping brand new soil about 5% of the time to our customers. And when we looked at that on a purely life cycle assessment basis, that was actually worse for the environment than the gains on the sugarcane based packaging, which was such a bummer. I mean, we sat and argued about this for a while. So we have now unfortunately moved to it is a plastic. It's a 60% post-consumer recycled plastic. That was the highest percent we could go with this manufacturer. And then we partnered with a organization called the Plastic Bank to actually remove 2x its weight in plastic from the oceans.
Wow.
So, again, I would say it's a classic example of kind of that sustainability journey where you have to find what sort of matches the unique needs of your product and your community, with frankly just the technology that's available. And I am sitting and waiting for that sugarcane technology to just get a little bit better. And maybe we'll try it on some of our smaller bags again. But I think, again, it'll be a constant iteration where we're trying to figure out where the edge is on on how sustainable can we go and still deliver an experience for our customers that they expect.
Yeah, then that's totally the key. Like we said earlier about peat, we didn't know at the time
Yeah,
that utilizing so much peat was going to be a negative thing. So now moving forward, packaging is such a big deal to companies because you're like, I don't want to put more garbage in the world, especially if I am a sustainable company
right.
or, involved in that sector. But what does that look like? Because we're not just walking in to Rosy Soil and picking up soil with our hands and then carrying a handful of soil home.
Yeah.
There's got to be a way to move product. How do we do that, right? So, it's interesting to hear that there's so much thought now on your side, like what does that packaging look like? Because, you're working so hard to be carbon neutral. You can't,
Yeah.
detrimentally do all that bad stuff then with the packaging, which is,
Yeah.
it's such a weird space right now because we're trying so many things and there's still so much of these like old, I'll call them old tools out there that we're trying to phase out. And there's that balancing act of like, how do we move forward, but still be able to fulfill everything we want to do now, to be carbon neutral and sustainable and everything like that. So, with that said, so it looks like you're getting great penetration in the market. People are, finding out more and more about you. Let's talk a little bit about your marketing journey because I know you guys are on the socials, which I love. You're on Instagram, on TikTok, and everything like that. What in marketing has really been your biggest needle mover? Has it been social media? Has it been word of mouth? Has it been getting into big retailers to suddenly have greater brand recognition? Like, how are people really finding out about Rosy Soil these days?
Yeah, I mean it's a bit of an all of the above answer, but I will say I think probably our primary awareness channel is actually just retail. Like folks are walking into all of these amazing garden centers every day and discovering the brand, and then obviously they can, go to our socials or go online to learn more. But what I think we've been really excited about is partnering with the retailer and their local community to tell that story. So whether that's social media collabs, influence, sending an influencer into the store to shop, doing trainings with the staff at the store to help figure out how to tell the story. All of these indie retailers have their own really amazing kind of vibrant communities that we can help kind of educate each other together. And that's been a really, I think, fun part. I would say like kind of the base of the marketing strategy. And then from there we do, you know, stuff on our socials, influencer collaborations. We do a little bit of paid media as well. But what we've really tried to lean on, I would say again with the retailer thing is being sort of education first. And that's what we hear again and again from our customer base is like, we want to learn more about soil. We want to learn more about sustainability. We want to learn more about how to be better plant parents. And, we've really tried to leverage education as a tool to then obviously talk about the Rosie story, but just help people be better gardeners in general. And that's been a really, really fun process.
Yeah, and you're exactly right in that because all of my gardening, knowledge comes from my local gardener. So my
Yeah.
local gardening store closest to me is Anawalt Lumber. And I
Hmm.
did develop, very close relationships with the gardeners there because they were helping me so much on my journey. And they were the ones that did tell me to stop calling it dirt, it is soil. So I can really see how that has been to your benefit to really get on that ground level with them and have them educate and, really show people. Because when they recommend something to me, I buy it because I'm like, okay, they know. So, that makes a lot of sense. So then like maybe moving forward then, what do you see as your strategy to get maybe greater market penetration or to develop different products? Like, do you guys have a strategy going that way? Because as we all know, it's like you have one product, which is great, but everybody's always like, what's next? So kind of what's next on the Rosy Soil meter?
Yeah, so we're launching new products pretty regularly. We're kind of crazy about it, so we typically will run 6 months to a year of trials. I like to joke that we'll kill 1,000 houseplants so that you don't have to. Um, but yeah, we have some really exciting products in the pipeline. We actually just launched a biochar booster, so it's a inoculated biochar product. It's 50% biochar, and then we add compost and worm castings and this really interesting fermented compost called bokashi, so it's super full of life. But the idea is bring everything that we've learned about the benefits of biochar to whatever existing soil that you have. So whether you're building new raised beds at home or you want to top dress, whatever is going on in your garden, it's a great way to start to introduce biology and biochar and life into your soil. So yeah, so that one launched very recently. It's available on our website and on Amazon and all that good stuff, and it's now kind of rolling out to our retailers as well.
Oh, very cool. I'll
Um,
have to check that out. When you're talking
yeah,
about education too, a thought popped into my head. It's like this would be such a great school project, like
yeah,
launching this in like some grade schools and like teaching them how to garden because, one of my pet peeves is that we're so far removed from certain things, from our food source, from how food is grown and things like that. I'll let you know, I grew up in Philadelphia. I didn't even see a cow till I was about 20 years old. And now I think we're even more far removed from that, maybe because of social media. And it would be great to launch a project like that where like you're teaching kids how to garden,
yeah.
specifically with Rosy Soil, of course.
I love
So,
it. Yeah, my aunt is a second grade teacher, and we did a little biochar course for her second graders. So we sent them all soil, they grew seeds in the biochar. We did a whole like biochar informational session. It was super fun. I love that stuff, and I want to do more of it. I had one of the kids ask me, did biochar exist in the time of the dinosaurs, which was kind of a
ah,
stumper of a question because I really had to think about it. The answer is yes, because it forms naturally, but it took a second to figure out the answer to that one. But yeah, I love it. I want to do as much education as possible for, every type of gardener.
oh, good. So, educate me more on biochar. So, how is biochar created if it was around during the dinosaurs?
Yeah, so it forms naturally in kind of prairie and forest fires. So biochar is basically in between, a wood fuel or an organic fuel and ash. So if you think about your fireplace, right, it starts as wood and then it ends up as ash, and in the middle is this kind of charcoal zone. So that happens naturally. I mean, we think about like the soils in Iowa as being super fertile, it's because they're about 5% of this naturally occurring charcoal. Um, and then what happened is about, and it's not quite sure, maybe between 2 and 5,000 years ago, indigenous farmers in the Amazon basin, which has notoriously sandy soils, kind of figured this out that if they start fires of organic waste and then bury the fire, so they put it out, that charcoal is left in their soil. So they have some of the most fertile, still to this day, some of the most fertile soils in the world are in the Amazon basin because these indigenous farmers figured out how to basically wield this natural technology. And so now fast forward to today, we've been using humans have been using char in agriculture for as long as written time and even before that. It's now a little bit fancier than that. So there's, bigger machines that basically you put organic waste in one side, it gets it hot in the absence of oxygen. And so instead of it combusting and releasing all of that CO2, it basically fixes the carbon in that material. It looks like charcoal. It's really, fine grained charcoal, but it's essentially pure carbon. And that is a wonderful benefit on the soil side because plants love carbon rich soil. Like I said, it holds water, it holds nutrients, it acts as a storehouse for microbes. But then on the environmental side, because that organic waste, which would have decomposed or burned and released all of its stored carbon, it's then fixed in the material. And so the entire process is net carbon negative. So, for example, like for about every ton of biochar produced, about 3 tons of CO2 are fixed in that material and are considered non-recalcitrant. So they won't release into the atmosphere over a very long period of time.
Wow, that's such amazing. The whole life cycle process like that is just something, again, that I think as a society we need to be more educated on. I actually saw an exhibit in downtown LA about a year or two ago where they were talking about the importance of forestations burning specifically for that process because it does release all these nutrients that then help this new
Hmm.
growth, which is a
Yeah,
little crazy. I'm even saying that considering the last few weeks in LA, we've
yeah,
had these horrible fires, but that's, different, from what we're talking about here. I just want to make that very clear to people, but there is a natural life cycle that needs to happen to regenerate, the environment and the earth and the air and everything. And that is something, again, that I think we need to be better educated on so we all understand how that works. And we understand like really what the detriment of environmental pollution is, how it has such a global scale and things like that.
Yeah.
And as we move forward now, talking about like, what's going to happen with the environmental, initiatives that we had set forward that seem to be now being backtracked because of the current, administration, what is that really going to mean to us? So at least we have people like you that are really already thinking about this and thinking about things like the soil and how we need to be very proactive to make sure that we have this ability to really have this nutrient dense base to be able to grow things because you don't know, we might in the very near future have to grow a lot of our own food, and we better need to know how to do that. So thanks for thinking of that way before we were talking about it.
Yeah, totally. And I think again, it's about just making it easy for people. I come to this problem with a very sustainability kind of climate focused, maybe almost an agenda. Oh, that's our kind of like secret mission. But at the end of the day, we are just trying to create the best soils possible so people can be better gardeners. And whether you want to get involved in the sustainability or the carbon conversation or not, that's totally fine. I think our impact is greater when we can just deliver the best products for people. And behind the scenes, it just so happens to be super sustainable?
Absolutely. And since we've talked so much about personal gardens, I want to hear, what does Chad's personal garden look like? What are you growing these days, Chad?
So I live in the middle of Manhattan in New York. So I am very much both space and light constrained. I'm lucky that I do have a small balcony, so I can grow. I grow in basically grow bags on the balcony. I'm a big kind of edibles person. So, tomatoes, beans, greens, kind of, I love to eat what comes out of my garden. And then I have in my apartment, I have maybe 2 feet of good light for houseplants. So I have them all just sort of crammed. I have a couple grow lights. I am trying to use as much of the limited space, my kind of 500 square foot apartment, as I can to grow as much as I can.
Well, see, you're a great test subject then because you're truly like living the life that many Americans do, where I have very limited space and light. How do I even grow anything?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that would be another great little school training you could put out there. It's like with the most limited amount of light and space, this is how you can grow a tomato.
Yeah, totally. And that's one of my honestly favorite parts of my job is just helping people. So I run our customer support email and, IGDM and all that stuff, and I get the weirdest questions, but it's so fun to like help people on their gardening journey and, you find little pieces of unlocks and help them figure out their next thing, and it's just it's a lifelong kind of process. I tell people it's okay to kill plants because you're figuring things out as you go. And yeah, it's super fun.
All right. Well, since you mentioned a weird email, I have to ask, what's the weirdest email that you've gotten?
Oh, I get, like pictures of someone's 15-year-old cactus that grew some weird mold and try to figure out what to
Yeah.
do about that. And, it's so context dependent. I usually come back with like 15 questions about, what did you change? What's the environment? Like it's funny. It ends up being a lot of back and forth with people. And then I'll go to the other end of the spectrum, which is, someone just got their first house plant and they have no idea what to do, or they heard you're supposed to repot but they're worried about doing it. And I love those conversations too, because I think you can give a couple, like two or three really easy things, and all of a sudden they're a much more successful and much more confident gardener.
Well, that's good to know that you actually know what you're doing. So everyone listening, contact Chad directly. He will diagnose your plant problems. No, I'm kidding. But I will
No,
let you know.
we put a phone number right on every bag, and we say like text us. It doesn't go to my personal phone number, but we say, text us with whatever plant questions you have. Because I think people have a lot of anxiety sometimes about nurturing something, accidentally killing a plant. And so we try to create this whole kind of brand and product and all the support around it to just help people be better gardeners. And sometimes it's a couple little steps, and sometimes it's a little bit more complicated than that. But like I said, it's a fun journey.
Yeah, people definitely get very emotionally involved.
They
I
do.
do have a lot of plants in my apartment. Most of them are doing very well. Some of them are, need a little tender love. But when people first walk in, they're like, oh my God, you have so many plants. They look so good. And then they always turn around to me and almost confess to me how
Yeah.
they've killed their own plants. First
Yeah.
of all, as if I care. Secondly, as if I'm judging them. And third, like I am their priest. And I'm like, but people are so emotionally invested in
They
like,
are.
oh my God, if my plant dies, it's because I'm a bad person. And it's
And
like
you know
you're
what?
not a bad person. You just didn't know about Rosy Soil. But now you do. So you have no excuse. So if your plant dies, it is because you're a bad person because you didn't buy Rosy Soil. I'm just going to put that out there.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far, but I will say I think a lot of people think they're bad gardeners and they've really just been using bad soil. Like the soil is the foundation for the success of the plant, and jamming plants into low quality peat and sewage sludge and fertilizer that gets super damp and then super dry is not how these plants evolved to survive. And so with a low quality soil, you're just constantly fighting the plant to stay on the edge of survival, essentially. Whereas if you can give it something that's been designed to curate an environment similar to what they evolved in, your life is a lot easier. Like our customers, the two words they use most to describe our soil is easy and reliable. Because when you compare it to peat, it is just it is so much easier. You can be a bit of a lazier gardener and you can get away with a little bit more when you use good soil.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for ending on such a high note now for anyone out there that was feeling badly about their dead plants.
It's
Chad
okay.
just relieved you of responsibility. He's giving you a game plan. Follow through with it. So, Chad, tell everyone where they can find you and Rosy Soil online because I know that they would immediately make their lives easier.
Yeah, so you can find us at rosysoil.com. We have a store locator right at the top. So just click there and see if we're in your favorite local plant shop. If we're not, tell us and we'll reach out to them. But you can also, yeah, you can buy it directly from our website. You can buy it on Amazon. We try to just meet people where they are. So if you Google Rosy Soil, you'll find it hopefully near you.
Yeah, actually, you have really good SEO because you're showing up at the top of search results. Congratulations to you and your marketing team. With that said, there will be links in the show notes so you guys can click directly to Rosy Soil, check it out, read the blog, get educated, reach out to Chad and his team if you need to. And
Yeah,
with
send us
that
some
said,
texts.
Chad, it has been a pleasure to talk to you. You have taught me so much. Thank you very much. And thank you for being such a little soil nerd that you're just like, I'm just going to create this amazing soil and change the world.
Oh, thanks so much. This is super fun. I appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Party Podcast. If you're an entrepreneur or professional who would like to be on this podcast, please visit boomtownmarketing.com and click on podcast. We believe that every business has the potential to change the world for good, and we want to support our community to help make the world more ethical, compassionate, and sustainable for all future generations to come. And if you're looking to build your business, no matter what level you're at now, request your free marketing consultation at boomtownmarketing.com and click Get Started.